Hello, welcome back to CamBro Conversations. In today's conversation, I'm lucky to be joined by Simon Thomas. Simon, thanks for joining me.
Colin, lovely to see you. You okay?
Yes, excited for this one. And
Good.
we're having a good chat beforehand about all things golf, but and our mixed fortunes in that space. But for me, Simon, you first came into the public consciousness as a presenter on Blue Peter, and that's where I remember you from when I was at kind of late stages of primary school. Simon was
Oh no! This Colin is making me feel instantly ancient. The amount of people I bump into who go, I used to watch you when I was a kid, and I said, well, how old are you? And they went, oh, I'm sort of 32, and I'm like, oh my days.
well, I'm sorry for that, Simon, but I'd love to go way back before that in terms of what shaped the man that ended up on Blue Peter before that happened, because I think a lot of what happens within our childhoods, particularly when you're somebody that's as reflective and articulate as yourself, is really interesting to dive back into, to think about what role did these experiences play to develop the man that we now have before us.
Okay. Do you want me to start, or?
Yeah, you go all the way back, Simon. I'll just chime in and find out a little bit more as we go.
I don't think if you'd seen me at school, you'd have gone, there's a guy who's going to end up on the TV. I actually remember when I got the job on Blue Peter, because what I did find is that people came out of the woodwork that I hadn't heard from for years, most notably school friends who just hadn't heard from in about 7 or 8 years. And I remember one of the comments that were made by more than a few of them was that we'd never have thought you would end up on telly. You're always quite quiet at school. And I don't remember being massively quiet at school, but I was definitely someone who I was struggling to know who I was at school. I was in that place where I wasn't, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, I wasn't the kind of nerd crew, but I wasn't the cool crew. I was kind of somewhere in between. I didn't kind of know where I fitted in. I loved my sport at school, but I wasn't kind of good enough to be right at the top. And I went to a public school only because my dad was a vicar. And when we moved down to Surrey from Norfolk when I was 10, these two schools, they ended up going to a prep school and a public school, were founded for vicar's sons. So basically, I went on the free. There's no way a vicar can afford to send his kids to a private school. And I very quickly worked out that at school, in terms of being accepted and in terms of really making a mark at these particular schools, it wasn't really about how good you were academically. It was about what you could deliver on the sports field. And if you could deliver really well, particularly when I got to public school, you'd get the much coveted green jacket. And these guys that wore the green jacket, they were the ones who got sports colours, as they called it at public schools, basically an award for being good at rugby or cricket, athletics, whatever it was. And it marked them out. I actually, when I think back on it, I just think it was wrong. You know, okay, maybe a tie or whatever, but it really did mark them out. These were the successful ones. These were the cool boys. And it left people like me who loved playing rugby, was fairly good at athletics, but just not amazing. Well, where do I kind of fit into all this? So I very much describe my kind of school years as that kind of battle, which I see a little bit in my boy Ethan now, he's 12, that kind of battle to fit in. Where exactly do I fit in? And I think when you're really young, these things matter massively. As you get older, you get a much more rounded, impression of life and actually what really matters. And actually, I don't need to be part of that group over there. I'm quite comfortable with the group I'm in now. And I think it was only, Colin, when I got to university that really I began to find my feet and grow in confidence and begin then to start looking down the kind of broadcasting route. So I think that's why it came as such a surprise to people when, back in the tail end of 98, early 99, suddenly I pop up on Blue Peter.
What did you find flowing at school then? Like you said, you quite liked playing rugby, but you weren't one of the top performers, so you didn't get the green jacket. But what did you find enjoyment in?
I think I found a lot of enjoyment in, I was quite good at art. So I tended to find a lot of kind of, that was one way of being, I guess, accepted, just seen as someone who was quite decent. And actually, I did a little bit of public speaking when I was at school. And I remember, I was thinking about this the other day and thought how bizarre this was, in that I was part of the Christian Union because I'm a man of faith. And I ended up just doing a whole school assembly on my own. So the CU, I think once every 3 to 4 months, it would be their turn to do assembly on a Wednesday. And I somehow ended up volunteering to speak to the entire school, to 550 guys. And I was thinking about it the other day, thinking that's really weird, because at school I didn't feel hugely confident. I didn't feel, definitely, as I said, wasn't one of part of the cool crew. And yet I was very willing to stand up in front of the whole school and deliver a kind of challenging message. So I don't think I totally lack confidence. But I think as one of the things that I enjoyed as I got on in school was taking on responsibility. And so it's a very ingrained thing within the public school system. Your house, we all have houses at school, but in the public school system, it's very it's a really, really big part of school life. And becoming a house captain in your final year in the upper sixth form was a huge deal. And there'd be lots of talk in the 3 years leading up to that. Who's going to be house captain? And people say, oh, it's definitely going to be him, definitely going to be him. And it ended up being me. I ended up becoming that, and then a school prefect. And I really enjoyed that kind of responsibility. I enjoyed that kind of looking out for other people. And in many ways, that sort of helped me grow in confidence that final year, just to get given that kind of responsibility. But it was, for me, mainly school was about trying to prove something, because I came, as I said earlier, from the state school system in Norfolk to the public school system in Surrey. And the gap between what we were doing academically in Norfolk and what we were doing in Surrey was huge. So I felt like I was straight away in this kind of competition to catch up and prove that actually I could be academically as good as all these people around me, even though I was starting from a further place back from where they were academically. And so I really, that was my big driver. I wanted to kind of prove to myself, prove to my parents, but also prove to my peers that I can cut it in this strange new culture that is private school. And it really drove me. And sometimes when we're looking at Ethan now at 12 at the high school down the road, just from where I'm sat now, we're trying to not ingrain it in him, because he's got to find his own way, but just wanting him to capture a little bit of what I had and what my wife Doreen has, which is that real drive to make something of yourself without putting too much pressure on him.
It's funny, what stands out to me when you were saying about presenting to the school assembly and wanting to prove yourself is that you had a ready-made role model in that your dad was a bishop. And
yes. Well, not quite a bishop. He was a vicar. I think he'd quite like to be a bishop.
Wrong term.
he'd probably quite like that. But
that's a promotion. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you've got that role model there, and even though you didn't hold yourself up as somebody that was super confident with your dad as a vicar, you had somebody that went and did that as part and parcel every Sunday.
Yeah.
And you had seen that. And so for you to step up and do that would maybe be more natural to you than to some others?
I think it felt a lot more natural than I thought it would. It just didn't feel out of place. And it's the same now. I mean, people obviously would say, well, that's your job. You stand in front of people. But actually, there's a lot of TV presenters who aren't particularly comfortable in standing up in a group of people, because when you sit or stand in a TV studio, you see 4 or 5 cameras with a cameraman, a woman behind it, and the few people on the studio floor. You don't see all those people watching at home. I did a game between Manchester United and Burnley back in December for Amazon Prime. And, it was only the last few weeks the viewing figures came out, and I think it got 6.5 million people viewing it. Now, if you saw 6.5 million people beyond the camera you're looking at, you probably wouldn't be able to open your mouth. But there's something very different about being in a TV studio to standing in front of people. And I've always found it it's a weird thing to say, my safe space. I feel totally at home. It's not a cocky kind of thing. It's not like, oh, look at me, but I just feel just relaxed and comfortable. Whereas for some people, this is their worst nightmare, even people who work in broadcasting. And I've definitely felt that all those years ago in St. John's Leatherhead, standing up in front of the school and doing assembly. Obviously a little bit nervous, as in what are my peers going to think? But never felt out of place, which as a 17-year-old was quite strange.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes what we're doing at that age and finding that One of the things that I've spoken to a gentleman called Chris Williamson about before, who's the host of the Modern Wisdom podcast, is doing things that feel like play to you that are work to others can quite often be a bit of a superpower down the line, maybe a competitive advantage. Not that we're all competing against each other, but ultimately, if you find that, I can do this quite well and it doesn't feel painful to me, but wow, other people find quite hard. Maybe I've got a skill set here that I can apply and be good at in comparison to other people, which of course would mean that I can be remunerated, I can pursue this. But if we fast forward from presenting to the school to university, you mentioned that you started to get a little bit more involved in broadcast there. What did that look like?
It looked very amateur, but it was actually really good. So, for those listening who've been to university, you'll know that one of the things that happens around Freshers' Week, that first week at university, is that you'll have something on in the Guild of Students called I can't remember what they call it. It's like a Freshers' Fair, I think they call it. And basically, it's all the different societies, all the different sports clubs are there. They have their own little stalls, and you go around and see some of the kind of things you're interested in. I remember coming back to the sport thing. I remember going to sign up for the University of Birmingham. So I went to Birmingham University for the football trials on the second weekend. So Freshers' Weekend was the first one. The next weekend was the football trials. And, like most guys who love football, you fancy your chances. So along I went, and just a couple of guys from the Football Society were there with their tops on that you only got if you played for the university first or second. So a bit like public school, marking them out yet again. And boy, did you see them in the bars throughout the whole university career, always proudly wearing their AFC top. And they said, what position do you play? I said, I can play up front or on the wing. Okay, sign up here, trials next Sunday. And as I looked down at this piece of paper, there was all the other guys who put their names down. And it had name, position, and experience level. So I was like, great, okay, Simon Thomas, right wing or striker, and then experience. And as I looked down it, the first one I saw was had trials at Stoke, played for Liverpool's under 16s. It was like this roster of like incredible. So I put my name down. I got through the trials, but never made it even close to the seconds. But one of the other societies that I found as I was walking around there, and I'd probably say at this point, Colin, had a modicum of interest in the broadcasting world, nothing more than that. I'd watched Blue Peter as a kid and thought that would be amazing to work on. Never really, thought process-wise, went much beyond what a lot of kids who watched it as a youngster would think, which would be amazing job to do. And so in this Guild Fair, I came to this place called Guild TV. And I thought, what's that? So I went up to chat to them. I said, what's this? They said, well, we basically got a TV station here in the Guild of Students at Birmingham University. And we basically do programs that play out on the various TVs around the university. And they said, we've got a proper studio. We've got an introductory day coming up next week. And, if you want to sign here, you're very welcome to come along. So along I went. And to cut a long story short, they used to be, now for people of a certain generation, they will just go, what is Pebble Mill? But for other people, they'll know what Pebble Mill was, which was the BBC television studios in Birmingham. That's where all the daytime output used to come from back in the day. And it was still there when I was at university, because I'm that old. And what they've done is, over a period of time at the university, this Guild TV, any equipment that was being cast to one side and replaced by newer, more modern equipment of the BBC, they would go and ask for or pay a little bit of money for. So they built this really good studio with 3 cameras. They had a proper gallery, a sound gallery, a vision mixing gallery. And I ended up presenting this program on a Friday lunchtime called The Lunchbox. It's imagination for you, which was a magazine show. Me and this other girl who still to this day, I feel so bad, I can't remember her name. But we used to present it. It went out to an audience probably of none. It was on the little TVs, no widescreen TVs, Colin, in these days, all around the bars. It was never on in terms of volume. It was just on, there was a screen presence.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically like Sky Sports News back in the day, wallpaper. And but I love doing it. And what I enjoyed about it was it gave you an experience of actually, okay, it might feel very amateur. Okay, nobody watches it. But actually, in terms of the raw things you need to do live TV, it was all there. You had an earpiece, so you'd have your director and producer talking to you. They'd call camera one, so make sure you look at camera one over there or camera three there. Just interacting with a co-presenter, learning how to address a camera properly. And so I did that for a couple of years and I absolutely loved it. And it was the day on which I did my last show. So it was summer 1995. I'd done all my finals, was waiting to see what I'd got in terms of whether I got a Desmond or maybe above. And I did my final show, and this lovely producer came up to me at the end, and she said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "I don't know. I've thought about lots of things. I'd like to try broadcasting, but I just, I'm not sure." And she said, "I'd give it a go." She said, "You've got something, and just give it a go. If you don't try, you'll never know." And so I came out of university and thought, right, this is it. And I kind of made it a 3-year plan. I'm not sure why it's 3 years, but I just in my head said, right, 3 years. I'm going to try and make it. This has set something off inside me that I didn't expect. Didn't go to university to become a broadcaster. I went to university to work out what was next. And I found myself here, and then began this 3-year journey post-university to where I ended up.
Did you need those words of encouragement from that producer to do that, Simon, or did you have that set in your head already?
I think it was two things meeting. In my head is this kind of light bulb's gone on, which is going, this is something I'm really, really interested in. But then you get that little voice of self-doubt that goes, but come on, this is impossible. So many people want to do this, and this is going to be really, really difficult. And you got to remember that these were the days where, there was no YouTube, the internet was in its very infancy. So, there was nowhere to showcase yourself like there is now. There's so many opportunities for young people, and at whatever age you are, to showcase yourself as a presenter. You can publish stuff in the next 10 minutes if you're quick enough. But there was nothing like that then. So you think this is going to be really, really difficult. So that little voice of doubt says, I wouldn't bother. But sometimes in life, we need someone who just gets alongside you and says, have you thought about actually really pursuing this? So it's kind of the two things meeting. And I came out of university and thought, no, I'm going to give this a shot. I don't want to get further on in life and think I never gave it a go.
Yeah. And what does that look like then? So you've got 2 years of experience doing the University Student Union Guild TV show. And then the aspiration in the back of the head is, I quite liked watching Blue Peter when I was younger. How cool would that be? But there must be a massive gap in between in terms of how do you fill that void? How do you make that step?
It's a great question, because now it's very different. If I want to find out, if I was now early 20s again and setting out, and I'd identified a program. Let's take the One Show, for example. I really want to be a One Show presenter one day. Well, I could go away from our conversation, Colin, sit down on the laptop on which I'm talking to you, get onto LinkedIn, and probably within a couple of minutes, I would be able to find out the editor, and I'd be able to find out their contact details and be able to drop them a line, and I could attach my show reel to the email. It's so much easier. It doesn't make getting it any easier, because actually what it's done is it's opened up the amount of people who are able to do that. So the competition has got higher. Back then, this is essentially in a very brief form what happened. I get back to my parents' house. They were living in Beccles, so my dad had gone back to East Anglia, he was now in Suffolk. And I went back there for the summer. I ended up spending most of it in terms of work, strawberry planting at a strawberry farm nearby. I needed some money for the summer. I got paid 1p a plant. I tried strawberry picking, but I went nowhere, because they used to provide strawberries for M&S, who were very fussy about strawberry size. So I'm going off on a tangent here. And I worked out very quickly that I was going to make no money from that. So I said, anything else I can do? They said, well, this strawberry planting is backbreaking. Everyone hates it. So I rocked up. You start at 6 a.m., finish at 2, some fields near Beccles in Suffolk. And you got paid 1p a plant. I used to go home, cash in hand at the end of the day, with a minimum of £45. My best day ever, £55. So do the maths. It was a lot of strawberry plants.
Yeah,
so when I was doing that, I'd get home and I would work on trying to put this plan together to get somewhere. So what I needed was, first of all, I needed a showreel tape, which is essentially your kind of visual CV. You are showing the person you're sending it to what you can do, who you are, how you relate to a camera, all those kind of things. but I needed to find people I could send it to. I needed to find out who was the editor of Blue Peter. But actually, if Blue Peter wasn't going to immediately work out, where else in the industry could I get work experience? Where else could I just get my first foot on the rung of the ladder in broadcasting, which is always the hardest bit, or get your foot inside that door and get the first interview. So I sat down, I'd ordered a book to a bookshop. This is no Amazon orders back then. Called How to Become a TV Presenter by a guy called Toby Anstis, who used to be on CBBC. Some will remember his name. I think he's now on Heart Radio. And I got this book and I devoured it within a day. Lots of really good tips, lots of tips on how to make a showreel tape, do's and don'ts. And at the back of this book was also lots of names and addresses on various people in the broadcasting industry. I also found another book, which I can't remember the name of it, but it was a kind of broadcasting book that again had the latest up-to-date list of names. And I basically sat there over a week or so making a showreel tape. It involved me going out into Beccles Town Centre, because in his book, Toby had said, do something whilst talking to camera. Yeah, which is the essence of being a Blue Peter presenter. You know, when you do the makes, the famous makes, you know, the challenge of that is you've got to carry on communicating with the audience while making something. So you need to put something in your showreel tape that shows that ability, because it's actually, believe me, harder than people think. So I went with an ironing board. I thought, show a bit of humour as well. I went with an ironing board and a pile of washing and ironed clothes in the middle of Beccles Town Centre with bemused shoppers walking past going, who's this? And so I had my showreel tape then once I'd done that. And then I had my list of names to send it to. So you'd write a letter and then pop the showreel tape in there and then send it off. Most of them went to Television Centre in London. And for a while, I got absolutely nowhere. And I moved down to London in September of that year, because I knew that at the time was the place to be in terms of getting a break. And I ended up working at Selfridges for 2 years. I needed to pay the bills and ended up doing a runner's job at LBC Radio in London near Hammersmith. But the longest period I had as a runner was for CBBC at weekends. So when I wasn't working at Selfridges. But for quite a long time, Colin, I got absolutely nowhere. Most of those letters that got sent out came back with the traditional, thanks for your interest, we're not hiring at the moment, but we'll keep your details on file. I very quickly realized when I got into the industry that we'll keep your details on file means they'll be collecting dust in a box in the corner of a room somewhere.
Yeah, it's challenging. What keeps you going during a period like that? Because you've given yourself a 3-year timeline, you said a 3-year plan. What keeps you persevering with the hope that one day it's going to happen?
It's a really good question, because there were plenty of times when I didn't think I probably was going to make it, because I came very close to getting a job as a CBBC presenter. You know, the guys who used to link the shows, they used to call it the broom cupboard back in the day, because I'd started running, as I said, at Children's BBC at the weekends and then got offered an audition. At this point, I've applied for Blue Peter twice and had the letter coming back saying, we'll keep your details on file, basically code for no. And I had this audition at CBBC, so I got really, really close and everything was pointing towards. So, if I wasn't going to get Blue Peter, this was not a bad second, because you're going to be on television, you can showcase your talent, and who knows where it might lead. You just need that opportunity, but it was so hard to get it. And there were plenty of times, standing on the Hugo Boss floor on the second floor at Selfridges on Oxford Street in London, and you're thinking, this just isn't going to happen. But there was just something inside me that just wouldn't give up. And I think that's been one of the things that I've had throughout my life that I'm really, really grateful for, is that when I go after something, I tend to stick at it. I don't give up too easily, whether it's running a marathon, whether it was going to public school all those years ago and thinking I'm either going to sink or swim here, so I'm going to try and swim and I'm not going to give up. That's kind of been a theme throughout my life. And I'm really thankful I have that within me, because there are times, plenty of times I've had over the course of my life where you have felt totally like giving up. But there was just something that kept driving me on. There's just something inside me that said that this will come good at some point. It may not be Blue Peter, it might not be, but something's going to come good at some point. And I would always hold on to that. And I actually used to joke to the guys I used to work at Selfridges with, who were lovely guys. We had a lot of fun those 2 years, because we had no real responsibilities, just earn enough money to pay your rent and have a few beers after work. But I'd always say, one day, I'm going to come back with with someone for the BBC or wherever I'm working to buy some clothes for a TV show I'm doing, and I said it'll be Blue Peter, and they always laugh, go yeah, whatever. But lo and behold, a few years later, I actually walked back in buying clothes with someone from the BBC.
Love that. It was you were manifesting before The Secret and all those things were popular in the world, and you were speaking it out into existence.
Yes, exactly.
You mentioned you're a man of faith, Simon, and obviously with your upbringing. What role did that play in keeping you going during this period?
It played a really significant part, and I totally appreciate that for people listening to this who, wouldn't say they have a faith of any particular kind, would just say maybe say happy coincidence or purely don't understand this. But I remember vividly going back to that period in Beccles after university where I'm about to write all these letters and I'm about to send my showreel tape out. I remember sitting there and thinking, I haven't, as a Christian, I haven't prayed about this. I haven't, involved God in any way, shape, or form. And that for me is part of my faith. This isn't a doctrine. It isn't about following a set of rules. It's about a relationship. So I thought I probably ought to include God in this. So I said a prayer that afternoon that God would show me a sign, just something that this is the right route I'm going on. This isn't just some kind of, ego-driven ambition. This is actually part of what I'm supposed to be doing in life. And so I just prayed a quick prayer and I said, just give me a sign, please, that I'm not about to waste the next 3 years of my life. And later that afternoon, I was waiting for my dad to go out for the day because he had the only computer in the house, an old Mac, one of those white ones, those cube ones, I don't know if anyone remembers them. And off he went. So I came down to the study and put my list of names to write to. I was getting all ready to write the letters. And I looked to the left-hand side of Dad's desk, and there's a pile of magazines. And most of them, because he's a vicar, are churchy Christian type of magazines. And there was one on the top, and to this day, I cannot remember the title of it, but I just remember looking at some of the little sub-headlines on the front cover of some of the articles inside. And there was one that just said, why we need more Christians in the media. And I was like, ooh. And I thumbed quickly, feverishly to page 64, or whatever it was. And there was this amazing article being written on why actually, I think from a faith point of view, what Christians tend to do or have done in the past is they criticize what they see on the TV or what they hear on the radio or what they read in their papers from afar. And rather than, get involved in that industry and try and change it and try and make it a better place and be something more wholesome and something with a moral backbone, they set up their own things like their own radio stations, their own newspapers. But this article was exactly what I needed to read. It said, we actually need people like me in the industry, not outside it. And that was my kind of green light. And it was, Colin, that moment, that afternoon in the summer of 1995 in Beccles, that I always went back to on those days where I thought, this is just never, ever going to happen. I'm going to end up working at Selfridges for 5 years. And then I'm going to think, what on earth do I do with my life? That was the moment I always went back to.
Yeah, I find that very interesting because you speak very passionately and clearly about your faith. And it's not from a position of you should all have faith as well. It's a position that is what I used as my support system during this period, combined with, of course, maybe a near miss of getting the CBBC job to keep going through this period where a lot of doubt would be within your head naturally to say, this might not happen for me. But it did eventually happen. And Richard Bacon, controversially, got himself in a lot of bother and was leaving Blue Peter. And that was the opening you needed. But what was that process like in order to finally get over the line and be unveiled as a Blue Peter presenter?
Well, that was a really interesting moment, Colin, because if the truth be known, when Richard, sadly for him, got fired from Blue Peter, I was at around about the 3 and a bit years point from that initial thought at university of giving myself 3 years. And I was working for a charity by this point called Oasis Trust. And I'd sort of spent a year there in a voluntary role, just to kind of think through, because I got to the stage where I thought, I'm not sure this is going to happen. So I need some space and some time to, work out what happens next. If this isn't meant to be, then I needed some time. So I started doing that. And I had kind of I'd certainly given up on the Blue Peter dream. I just felt it's not going to happen. You know, you only need to be a half a student of the program to know, right, Richard Bacon's been there 2 and a bit years. Stuart Miles, he might do another couple of years. There's not going to be anyone leaving for probably the next 2 years at least. So what's the point in wasting my time, you know, hanging on to this dream? So I'd kind of let go of that. I hadn't totally let go of the broadcasting dream. So I was working with this charity, and then on that famous day in October of 1998, I was just at home in London. It was a Sunday morning, and a mate of mine texted me. And of course, you know, again, the internet, you know, infant stages compared to where it is now. Says, have you seen the front page of the News of the World? Now, obviously, the News of the World is not in existence anymore. So it'd be the Sun on Sunday equivalent now. Well, now you just say, have you seen Twitter? Have you seen what's on the front cover of the Sun on Sunday? Oh, quick look. Oh, my goodness. He said, honestly, go and look at the front page of the News of the World. So out the house I went, only a couple of minutes away. I mean, no great hassle. Went down to the newsagents, and there on the front cover is the Richard Bacon story. And I was like, my goodness me. And it didn't take a genius to work out that if this was true, that there's no way that he's keeping his job. And of course, by the Monday evening, he'd been fired, and they made the announcement on CBBC that afternoon. And I remember going to work on the Tuesday morning, and obviously in my head I'm thinking, oh, what do I do? You know, is it worth another crack? Is it, you know, have I got to a place now where I kind of just need to leave this behind? And there's a lady in our office called Sue, who used to be a local BBC News presenter, but was doing something different now, but, you know, really experienced in the world of television and stuff, and had seen some of the things I'd done in the past, presenting wise. And she came up to me on that Tuesday morning immediately, and she just looked me in the eye and she said, you have to apply. And I was a bit taken aback. I was like, really? Do you think it's worth it? She said, absolutely, you've got to apply. She said, leave it a week, because it's, you know, there are going to be a lot of people there quite upset at what's happened to Richard. You know, he's a hugely popular presenter. But apply, send another show tape in. So a week later, I popped my latest show reel in the post. Actually, I'd done a video for a charity, so I had some current stuff, and I just put the letter with it and went to the post box near where I was working, Southwark Bridge Road in London, and popped it in the box. And I kind of didn't really think anything more of it. I thought, well, it's worth a go. And I remember about 2 weeks later, my housemate in Brixton texted me. I was still at work. Said, there's a letter from the BBC waiting for you when you get back. And I was like, oh, I've had quite a few of those in the past, and I just know what will be in it. So I didn't really get excited. And it's funny how, isn't it, we hang on to every word when we're trying to wait for an opening. So I got home and I opened it, and I expected it to be exactly the same as all the other letters I've received. Keep your details on file. But there was something subtly, Colin, different about this letter. It said, we are currently shortlisting for interview. If you have been successful, we'll be in touch. And I thought, they've never said that. Never said that in a letter before. So I was like, oh, you know, and literally then about 5 days later, I got a call, and they said, we'd like to bring you forward for an interview. So a week after that, I went to Television Centre, and it was funny because as you were walking into the building, the latest guy who'd obviously been in for an interview as well was walking out, and you'd see others arriving. So you're doing that thing of kind of checking out the opposition and going, oh, he looks much more of a Blue Peter presenter than I do. And then you'd hear their voice and go, oh, that sounds so much more Blue Peter than I do. And your head's doing everything. And you had this interview, and then they throw you a curveball right at the end because you're not expecting this. They don't tell you what's going to happen. They said, now you just need to go to the Blue Peter garden, and we're just going to do a little piece to camera with you there. And again, you see the others coming out, just done it. You wait while someone else does their piece to camera, and you go, oh, they're really good, very natural, and I'm going to be nothing like that. So you had to do this piece to camera, and then you left. And it was about 3 weeks. I mean, it felt like 3 months.
Torturous.
Nothing. Yeah, nothing. And there's no one you can email, or well, you could have done, but you're just waiting, trying to focus on work back at the charity. And then I got invited for an audition. Which was incredible, because you're now like, oh my goodness me, I'm on the threshold of something life-changing here, you know. And I don't say that flippantly. You know, I knew it would change the direction of my life totally. And so I got invited for the audition, but that was an interesting day again, because what they decided to do for the first time ever, there've been lots of rumors down the years about what exactly happens at a Blue Peter audition. We've heard about the trampoline. Does that happen? We've heard that they have to interview someone who's holding a weird and wacky animal from London Zoo. Does that happen? So they thought on this occasion, they'll debunk the myth and they will film the audition process. So I remember them ringing me up after they'd offered me the audition and said, we're going to film it. Are you okay with that? Well, you're never going to say no. Actually, no, I don't want to just film it. I said, yeah, of course. But they said, what it's going to mean is you will be hanging out with the other 3 who are also being auditioned for the whole afternoon. Because normally in a Blue Peter audition, you wouldn't really see the opposition. You'd get to TV Centre, you'd be taken to makeup, taken to a dressing room, and you'd wait there for your time and then get taken to the studio and meet one of the current presenters. You wouldn't see the opposition. On this occasion, we were going to have to hang around with them for the day. I was like, oh, gosh. So anyway, I remember sitting there after we got to TV Centre and done a bit of filming, and the 4 of us sat in this area of the Blue Peter office. It was just this really weird dynamic, because you all are there for the same reason. You all want this job more than you've wanted any job in your entire life. And you're basically essentially checking each other out in terms of who's more likely to get it. And I was in there with a guy called Michael Underwood, who I know really well now. He's a good mate. He's married to a really good friend of mine called Angelica Bell. There was another guy called Jonas Hurst, who I think went on to do Channel 5 News. Not sure what he's doing now. And Jake Humphrey was another one of them. And obviously we know what he's gone on to do since then. And we kind of sat there and we had that really uncomfortable moment where I think it was Jake sort of popped and said, so, guys, what kind of stuff do you do broadcasting wise? And my sort of heart sank at this point. I thought, well, I'm working for a charity. I just spent 2 years in Selfridges and I'm not really doing anything. And each of them said what they're up to. And I think Michael was working for BBC Radio Northampton. Jonas was already doing stuff. Jake was doing a satellite kids TV channel back in Norwich and Norfolk. So they were all doing something. But I think, Colin, that conversation actually did me the world of good, because it was a little bit like that day I'd arrived in prep school all those years ago, where I felt so kind of out of my depth in a strange place. And in some ways, I felt out of my depth being in a Blue Peter audition, even though this is what I'd wanted the moment it arrived. But here I am sat with 3 guys who have done so much already. I've done pretty much nothing. But in my head, I just went, you're the rank outsider. You are the rank outsider. Just give it everything. And I remember eventually we got taken down to our dressing rooms. You had around about an hour and a half, just on your own, waiting for your slot. And I remember sitting in there and thinking, all these guys have got so much experience, they're going to walk this audition. And I just said to myself, I kept saying to myself, just go in there and leave nothing in that studio. Just give it everything. And I think it just changed my mind as I went in. I thought, really,
nothing to lose.
I'm nothing to lose. And this has been a dream, like it has been for the other 3, but they've got the experience. I haven't. And I think it really helped me, because I just went in there and thought, sod it, let's just give it everything. And I did.
And you were success. What a feeling that must have been.
It was, without doubt, the most surreal moment of my entire life. Because again, it was a long wait from the audition process, purely because they were so clearly and understandably worried about who replaced Richard, because whoever it was going to be, there was going to be an awful lot of interest in that person. This is the pre-social media era, so you didn't have that to deal with, but the press interest was going to be huge.
Well, you still had the tabloids who rake through everything, Simon.
Oh yeah. So they were all waiting to find out who was going to replace him. And I remember it's about 2 weeks, and I actually lost weight during that time. I didn't sleep much because I just wanted to know. And I was having conversations with my boss at the charity about what work I would have to be handing over if I got the job. And I was like, Ivor, please don't go there. I can't think through the possibility of getting this. But he said, but I need to kind of think it through. I said, I know, mate, but I just can't do it. It's too much. And then very randomly, one Monday afternoon, I was at Oasis, the charity I was working for, and I got a text from the series producer, John Comerford, and said, are you able to get to Television Centre for 6 o'clock tonight? And I was like, yep. And arrived there and got taken into the office of Lorraine Hegacy, who was the head of children at the time, who made the announcement about Richard all those weeks before. And they had a bit of a chat. And then she just said, are there any skeletons in your cupboard? And I went, And I thought about it. I said, well, no, not really. And I thought, I'm just going to be honest here. I said, look, I did have a couple of drags on a joint at a party about 2 years ago. I didn't like it, but someone had a camera there, as in one of the guys we were with. And then, again, this is pre-camera phones, so there was none of that nonsense going on. But I said, there may be a photo, but honestly, I didn't like it. And you have that brief moment, you think, gosh, is this it? And then she said, that's fine. And then she just reached around. I can still see it now. Opened this little fridge, and out came a bottle of champagne. And she just said, congratulations, you're Blue Peter presenter number 27. And it was amazing. And I remember walking out her door about an hour later. And on this board, as you walked out of her office, was this picture gallery. And it was the 26 previous Blue Peter presenters. And I just looked at it. I looked at all the presenters that I grew up watching. So the likes of John Noakes and Peter Purvis and Peter Duncan and Valerie Singleton and Sarah Green and Simon Groom and, you know, some of the heroes of my childhood. And I just thought, my days, I've just joined the most exclusive club in the country, which when I rewound my head to that summer of 1995, I don't think even then I ever really believed that this day would happen.
Yeah. What an experience in delayed gratification. And that elation was incredible, yeah. And what a process. Even when the carrot started to dangle with Richard's exit, it was still such a long process and stressful and all the different emotions you would have gone through during that period. But one thing I would love to learn about is the actual highs of being a Blue Peter presenter. Does one particular moment any stand out?
It's a good question, because I'm speaking on Thursday at my boy's old school back in Reading, so his old primary school. And they'd contact me a while ago about doing this, and I'll be honest, I'd totally forgotten. But thankfully, I'm free on Thursday. And I said to the mum who'd asked me to do it, I said, "What do you want me to speak on?" And she said, "Well, we'd like you to speak on the power of failure, how we can in life turn failures into something really, really positive." And straight away, I thought through that story that I've just told you of all the knockbacks. But also I started thinking, well, I did so many things on Blue Peter where, you know, there was a sense of kind of failing at something and then coming back to conquer it. And so I found the old DVD, which was one of my highlights show when I left the program, and I put it on the old Mac computer I've got here. And there's a program where you can basically pull the DVD off and then create a file. So I've now got my highlights program on my phone. This is the wonders of technology. And I was having a little flick through the other day, and I thought, my days. I mean, it's a long time ago. I left in 2005, April 2005. So, you know, it's getting on, goodness me, 17 years ago already. And I just had a little look through it. And it's like watching another lifetime. Actually, like watching another person, because clearly I've aged since then, and I've changed, and lots of different life experiences have molded me into the person I am today. We're always changing in life. We're never standing still. So it's like watching someone else. And I just thought, wow, you know, what an utter privilege to have done all those kind of things. You know, I was looking back at the moment, I gave the Queen a gold Blue Peter badge. But there's one thing that I'm going to show the kids on Thursday. And I watched it and thought, my days, that really did turn into a powerful film. So I'd always kind of wanted to skydive, and Blue Peter historically down the years has done a number of skydiving films. And it was about that time where another generation of viewers has gone through. So it's time to revisit skydiving. And so I made it pretty clear to them right from the off that along with flying with the Red Arrows, which sadly I never got to do, skydiving was one of my dreams. So it was all set up for me to go to San Diego in America to basically train with the RAF Falcons. And the film was going to culminate with me passing the AFF course that you have to do with skydiving. And then that next summer at some air show somewhere in the UK, I would do a display jump with the RAF Falcons. And the Falcons always go out to do their winter training in San Diego on the West Coast of America, because it's pretty much jump day every day, crystal blue skies, lovely weather. So they can just get loads and loads and loads of jumps in. So out we go, and I've got my sort of little booklet I'm reading on the flight out, and a few healthy nerves, because I've never jumped out of a plane before. I recognize it's quite a scary experience, but I'm backing myself big time that we'll be fine with this. And this is just going to be an amazing ride. And so we get out there, and to cut a long story short, I think we got to jump number 5 or 6. And I was watching this back last week as I'm thinking about this talk for Thursday. And as we're coming down, so when you're learning to skydive, you have an instructor either side of you, one hanging onto your right arm, one hanging onto your left arm. And they're basically making sure you just get your body position stable in the air. So you need to be stable. You're dropping at 120 miles per hour. So there's a lot going on. But when you pull your chute, you need to be stable. If you're not, then the chute can very quickly get tangled up. And then you're in a lot of bother. You're into reserve chute territory. So they come down with you. And then I think 5,500 feet when you're learning, you pull, and then you are on your own, but it's a very different feeling to free fall, because suddenly it's very peaceful and you glide very nicely back down to earth, hopefully somewhere near where you took off from. I think jump number 5 or 6, I pulled my chute at 5,500 feet, and I remember just nothing happening. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I could feel these punches on my side as we're plummeting towards the earth. And eventually, thankfully, this chute blows up and appears above my head, and everything's fine. And then after every jump, we'd watch the jump back. They'd have a video of it just to talk you through what you got right, what you got wrong, where your body position isn't quite right. They, in hindsight, said they should never have shown me this particular video, because you see, as we watched it back, Roger and Toby, who are my 2 instructors, literally punching my parachute pack to try and get the thing out. It wasn't coming out. And I totally lost my bottle, absolutely lost my bottle. I was as close to being paralyzed with fear as I'd ever been in my life. Yep. We tried to get me back going again. I think I did another couple of jumps. And the last one, there's this really powerful piece in the plane where you can just, and I was watching it back the other day and think, goodness me, you can see how scared I am. I don't want to jump. And I say in the plane as it's firing up to 14,000 feet, I don't want to do this. I can't jump. And then something inside me just said, give it one last shot. And I did get out the door and went. And then I never jumped again. And the whole filming trip got curtailed. And suddenly my director's dealing with a very different story. But what happened is that it ended up becoming a 25-minute program on me skydiving, which became a really powerful piece of programming, which actually got an amazing reaction from parents. So we had lots of letters and emails coming into the program, because what they said is that their kids kind of saw Blue Peter presenters as almost these untouchable superheroes who could turn their hand to anything and succeed at anything. And they said, it's been really helpful for my child and my children to see Simon actually being able to be vulnerable enough to put his hands up and say, I can't do this. I can't do this.
Genuine struggle. And
yeah.
An actual.
And then when we went back, so just to finish it off, we got to April of the next year, and I'd sort of toyed with this idea of going back to conquer my fear. So making a program of conquering fear. But obviously what I needed to do was find out whether I was going to waste the program's money or not by flying me back to San Diego. So I went to jump at a jump zone called Weston on the Green near RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire. And I went one weekend, and it had all been arranged through the program. So they've got a couple of instructors there who are going to look after me, and just go there on a Sunday afternoon and do some jumps. It was a beautiful day like it is today. Blue skies, went to Oxford, got there. And it's amazing, isn't it, Colin, in life, how smells evoke so many memories. And as soon as I smelt that very distinctive smell of aircraft fuel, I was like, oh, what the hell am I doing?
Heart rate,
walking out to the plane. And I sat there in the plane as this thing takes off, and it makes a hell of a noise and it rattles around. And we sort of start our slow climb that just always feels like it goes on forever, up to 14,000 feet. I'm looking opposite where I'm sat. And on the other benches at the opposite side of the plane is this lady. And she looks mature in years, shall we say. I'm looking at her going, she must be in her 70s. So I sort of shouted out above the plane, hello. She went, hello. I said, do you mind me asking, how old are you? And she came back and said, 72. I've been skydiving for 30 years. I love it. And I was just like, wow. And then before you knew it, the door goes open on the side of the plane. And I just see this 72-year-old woman almost running down the plane and just bombing out the door. And I thought, listen, if she can go, I'm going. And off I went. I did about 4 or 5 jumps. And I thought, I've got my bottle back. And so I persuaded the program, thanks to that lady, to go back to San Diego. And I will admit, when I first got there, a lot of the memories of the year before came flooding back. Same hotel, same smells and like all my days. But I conquered it. And so we made this program that was the kind of antithesis of the first one. The first one was about it's okay sometimes to fail, but the second one was actually sometimes in life we just need to try again, and the story may be very different. So that became an equally powerful film. So I think a long-winded answer to your question, Colin, but I think when I look back on all the things I did in the program, that just for the emotion of it, for the narrative, the unexpected narrative that became part of it, and also proving something to myself beyond producing a good program for the show, that's the one I always look back on and go, that those were an amazing couple of films to be part of.
Yeah, and that's why I love podcasts, Simon. You're able to do a long, drawn-out answer there that gives the detail and gives the depth.
Yeah.
Truly explains why that moment registers up there in a career during Blue Peter that would have had many highs and many moments of elation and many moments of pride with the content you created. But for that one to stand out, of course, you have to give the background and the detail as to the journey that you went on within that. So no, I absolutely love that. But you transitioned out of Blue Peter in 2005 and entered the world of sport. Was that something that was always on the agenda? Obviously, you had this, what I would maybe call a North Star of, I want to be a Blue Peter presenter. You hit that, but then you pivot. I know you're a big Norwich fan. That's one of the reasons that we know each other. And I'd love to learn what drove that decision.
So quite early on in my Blue Peter career, you'd get a lot of people, particularly around the time that you got the job, both those who do know what they're talking about, but also those who quite frankly don't. And one of the lines I heard quite regularly is, "Oh, you're made for life now." Now, they didn't mean it financially. Although Blue Peter, compared to Waver Charity, was a really well-paid job, it was not remunerated in the ways the papers reported. The papers always add a couple of noughts on to any TV stars' salaries. It's just standard procedure. But, I was paid well compared to what I was before. But the made for life bit was that this job offers you so many more career opportunities after it. Now, I don't know whether this is just me being maybe at the time glass half full or glass half empty. I don't know. But I never really believed that. I think, Colin, it's because of the journey of getting there, in that this wasn't a job that suddenly was handed on a plate. It didn't come about through some fortuitous meeting. It came through, yes, someone's misfortune, but a lot of years of trying and getting knocked back and trying again and getting knocked back and eventually getting the breakthrough. So in my head, it's just this narrative of like, don't ever assume that just because you've now got to here, that therefore you're going to end up there. So I just didn't believe it. Not because I didn't back myself, just because I thought it's arrogant for me to assume that just because I'm a Blue Peter presenter, therefore I'm going to be this when I leave. Now, I know quite a number of presenters have gone on, to have really, really successful careers in adults television, but I just didn't ever want to get in the position of assuming that's just going to happen. It
wasn't a guarantee. You recognized it was a door opener, but it wasn't access to absolutely anything that you wanted immediately.
Totally. And so quite early on, I kind of told myself that. It's not that I didn't back myself. I just said, do not just leave here and expect the world to open for you and for the offers to come flooding in. And so I started really early on at Blue Peter, thinking through what does come next. I knew that, this lasts for 5-6 years if you're good. If you're not, if your AI's audience indicators, they're constantly researching that and seeing how you're relating to the viewers. If they start getting really low, you're going to end up on borrowed time. So you've got to work hard at being really good at your job. But the question of what comes next was something that I would think about. I've always loved sport, had a passion for it. Okay, I wasn't a brilliant sportsman myself. I loved playing it, but I've always passionately enjoyed watching it, whether it's football, whether it's cricket, whether it's rugby, whatever it might be. I've just loved watching sport. I've grown up watching sport. My dad was sporty, and I've always loved it and had a passion for it. And that was really, I was kind of looking, what are realistic careers I could possibly pursue after this. And I thought I really, really would love to go down the sports route. And so really quite early on in Blue Peter, I began making those noises with the program, saying if there is a sports film, listen, I know that between the 4 presenters, we've got to share things out. But if there are opportunities on that side of things, I'd really, really love to do them. And so over the course of 6 years, I did a lot of sports films. And towards the end of my time on Blue Peter, probably the sixth and final year, I was starting to do bits and bobs for BBC Sports. So I was working on things like the marathon, just as a course reporter, the Great North Run, did a couple of things for 5 Live. And so really I was building up a little bit of experience. It wasn't suddenly that I'd got, oh, crikey, I'm leaving Blue Peter, what next? Oh, sport, can I give that a go? I'd made it clear quite early on that's where I wanted to go. But even when I left Blue Peter, it was a real struggle to get to that next stage in my career. But yeah, really early on, that was the kind of path I chose.
What were the barriers for you to move into sport? Because, I mean, maybe we can joke that Blue Peter is an institution like James Bond's an institution where it's a door opener, but are you typecast as children's TV presenter Simon Thomas in the same way that maybe somebody who stars as James Bond is typecast as James Bond? Maybe producers couldn't see you as something else.
100% you get typecast. And listen, I'm very proud of it. I'm proud of the fact that even now in 2022, I'll sometimes get stopped and people say, oh, remember you on Blue Peter? But equally, I get many conversations, people saying, seen you on the football, which is lovely as well. So you'll never lose. I don't want to lose that. I'm really proud of that period of my life. But it does put you in a certain box. So coming out of Blue Peter, the real challenge then was to be taken seriously as an adults presenter. And I think, Blue Peter's a great place to learn lots of different disciplines, because one of the real strengths of the program is it tackled so many different issues. So one minute you could be doing a really stupid make in the studio and you've got Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson, doing a make alongside you. That's another thing I saw on my highlights